Right. Hello, everyone. I'm Nevo Schpire, and we're live from Brandeis University. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Major David Ross from the Strategy Department of the International Spokesperson Unit of the IDF. On Saturday, April 13, Iran launched its very first ever direct assault on Israel. More than 300 missiles and drones in retaliation for the alleged Israeli strike on the Iranian consulate in Syria. This attack marked a new era of warfare in the sky and brought a special attention to the role of advanced air defense systems such as Arrow and David Sling. With ongoing speculations about a potential Israeli response and a growing threat of another Iranian attack, where we are here today to answer some of your questions with the IDF spokesman, Major in Reserve David Ross. Major Ross was born in the UK to the son of a Holocaust survivor and immigrated to Israel as a child. Before joining the IDF Spokesperson Unit, he served as an officer in the Armored Corps, where he held positions as a mortars officer, as a deputy company commander, and as an instructor in the international branch of the ground forces. David currently serves in the Strategy Department of the International Spokesperson Office. In his civilian life, David is a licensed attorney and works at Freshfield Brockhouse Derringer, the international law firm. He's also a Schwarzman Scholar and holds a Master's of Global Affairs from Tsinghua University in China. Major Ross, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
First of all, thank you, Nevo, for that kind introduction. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Can you hear me all right? Fantastic. So I think for me, it's really good to acknowledge the fact that each of you have taken time in your afternoons to hear about what's going on in Israel, in the Middle East, to update yourselves, whatever background you're in. It's for me, it's truly an honor to be with you and speak with you today. Nevo, I mean, when people ask us how we're doing in Israel, it's always it's a fraught question because you don't want to seem overly happy, because how can you be happy when our country is under attack and there's 133 hostages that are still being held in Gaza, and when our country, as you said, survived an unprecedented attack from Iran at the weekend, as all of you know. But then at the same time, you don't want to be all doom and gloom, because you don't want to put too much baggage on other people who are really suffering and who are struggling. For me, on Saturday night, I can say that I see myself as privileged to serve in the IDF during a time like this, to be able to be part of the efforts defending Israel. And that said, it was still a challenge to sleep on Saturday night. We all went to bed not knowing whether we would wake up in the morning, or more realistically, whether we'd be woken up by sirens in the middle of the night, or the sound of rockets falling. It really was unprecedented, and unprecedented also, just with anything that's unprecedented, there's the huge element of uncertainty that the Israeli people faced. And I think at this moment, it's important to acknowledge the resilience of the people of Israel getting up on Sunday morning. And I can say that for me, there was an eerie atmosphere on Sunday morning. And as I made my way to the military base, things were quiet, coffee shops were closed, everybody was very much in shock and taking in the news. And then by Sunday night, people had chosen to get back to normal. I saw wonderful videos of people dancing in the streets. That's obviously, I mean, you're here more to hear about the military side of things, but as a spokesperson and also as a member of the IDF, it's important for me to recognize the civilians and the impact that all of these big geopolitical questions and strategic actions and legal, potentially international questions of international law, how they impact the individuals on the ground. And this was after a couple of weeks of nerves of not knowing what Iran would do due to the alleged Israeli strike on the member of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in Syria. And so when you ask me how I'm doing well, thank you. It's good to be here with you all. And it's also a moment when I'm very proud to be a member of the IDF that once again in this war demonstrated the ability to do something that we've never done before, which is to successfully intercept over 90% of the missiles that were fired towards us, a combination of ballistic missiles, other missiles, and armed drones. One of those missiles didn't detonate and was intercepted. And I'm sure if you've been following the headlines, you can see pictures of the massive pipe or the massive rocket or portion of the rocket only that's been shown to journalists and shown to the world. And it really just goes to show the size of Iran, the size of the threat, and the success, both technological, as you, Nevo, mentioned, and also strategic success of Israel and our allies. It's important to mention that it wasn't just Israel that managed to stand against the Iranian terror on Saturday night. It was also the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and other allies who I can't name right now. But the success of coming together to withstand this unprecedented attack, both in terms of the fact that it was Iranians or rockets fired from Iranian soil towards Israel. Not that Iran has not been attacking Israel for many years via its proxies and by funding its proxies, but this was unprecedented, both in the fact that it was from Iran and also directly from Iran, and also in terms of the quantity of missiles that were fired at us.
Yeah, thank you so much for, this very important overview of what's going on right now. And perhaps this first question is maybe something that everyone is curious about. It's coming from Leo Rockme, he's majoring in biology at Yeshiva University. And he's asking, do you think Iran will strike again? And what is Israel's plan for that outcome? And also, will Israel retaliate for this past attack?
Okay, so in terms of will Israel strike, will Iran strike again? Now, my area of expertise, as you mentioned, I've done a couple things in life, but I have not managed to get into the minds of either Israeli leaders or I'd even more like to get into the mind of the Iranian leadership, and especially their ideological, religious extremists, and into their minds. Do we believe that Iran will strike again? We don't know. But what we do know is that, as we demonstrated on Saturday night, that we are able to withstand whatever they send in our direction. And that's not just us alone, but the coalition of allies who seek stability in the region, who seek to withstand the regime and the terror and its proxies. It's no secret that Iran isn't particularly popular amongst this neighborhood. And it's also no secret that the regime that controls Iran does not represent the Iranian people, and they're not particularly popular there either. So do we believe that they will attack? We really hope not. One of the things that I know I think about a lot on a personal level, but it also impacts some of the strategic work for the IDF, is understanding which groups in the Middle East and which of our current enemies, who I don't see anybody as a necessarily always an enemy. We always seek to have peace with those who are currently our enemies, but we try to think which ones of them are rational actors. Now, there are elements to which Iran are rational actors, and we hope that they will continue to be rational actors and they won't be motivated by religious extremism, which we know definitely has an impact in their thinking and in their strategy and in their actions. but we don't know exactly when they'll act. What we do know is that we're more than ready to handle what they've thrown at us. I mentioned the anxiety that Israelis dealt with. That's very real, but the IDF is stronger than ever. Our technological and research and cooperation with our allies is also stronger than ever. Now, in terms of Israel's retaliation, what we have said is that we will choose to retaliate at the time and place that we decide. Now, I think it's a clear message that we're not afraid to. It's if we choose not to, it's not because we can't. It's because we believe it's not the right time. We definitely have a just cause for full-on war in terms of the Iranian invasion into our own territory. However, we will choose when to do it, how to do it based on our strategic needs and based on what we believe is the best for long-term stability in the region.
Yeah. So we're talking about stability in the region, and we know Iran has its proxies and is having a large footprint in the Middle East. However, Iran is consistently expressing its intentions to not only stop in the Middle East, but basically to oppose what we know as Western values. So this next question is coming from Bailey Hustler. She's a graphic designer from Cincinnati, Ohio. And she's interested to know if Iran has a capability to launch a direct assault on U.S. soil.
Well, first of all, thank you for your question, Bailey. As an IDF spokesperson, I'm afraid I'll probably have to direct you to our close friends in CENTCOM and in the US military. Iranian capabilities of attacking US soil. Well, what we do know is Iran and Russia work very closely together. Actually, recently, Iran has been the one that's supplying weapons to Russia. Could they get their hands on the type of missiles, long-range missiles that could reach the US? They probably could, and they could also do it via any proxies that they have. However, the best way for Iran to currently attack the United States is by attacking Israel, because Israel clearly represents values that the United States aligns with. At least that's what comes out of US leadership, and definitely from a lot of surveys that I've had privilege to see. That's also what the majority of the US public believes as well. And so could they launch a direct attack on US soil? It's very unlikely that they would choose to do that. Again, I'm not an expert on US defense, but their best way of attacking US interests and demonstrating their desire to attack the United States would be by attacking Israel. And I don't think I need to remind you that many US citizens live in Israel as well, and there are hostages in Gaza who are also US citizens. But yeah, thanks for your question. I'm sorry. I think I'll have to direct you more to the US military side of things. And as I said, we do have many good friends who are working with them at the moment, actually.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, well, that makes sense. I mean, we have to follow the protocols of the IDF and the Air Force, and but you know, a lot of us in the U.S. I'm currently in the U.S. and they're concerned because of you know, Iran's development on the nuclear front. And so we got many questions, but so I was a former lieutenant officer in the Israeli Air Defense Division, and I know we can't really specify and answer this elaborately, but there is a very interesting question that's coming from Carly Nevis. She's a digital content manager for the NBA. And she's asking, can the Iron Dome deal with an attack from Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas simultaneously? And what would the war look like if the Iron Dome stopped working?
So thanks for the question, Carly. You sounds like you have a really cool job. Um, but Nevo, if you wanna correct me, feel free to do so. It's definitely your area of expertise. Let me give it a shot and then hand over to you maybe. But in terms of first of all, I'll ask the second question first. If there was no Iron Dome, many Israeli, there would be a lot of damage to Israeli civilian infrastructure as well as civilians. In the attacks by Iran last night, much of it was directed at Israeli critical infrastructure, and that the damage could have been formidable. I think I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it the rest to your imaginations. So without the Iron Dome, we'd be, I don't want to say in trouble because we'd find another way to deal with the threat, but the damage would be severe. In terms of a multi-front war, in terms of the Iron Dome, what any policymaker has to decide is where to use the resources that you have. And so the resources aren't unlimited. We have quite substantial resources, so we spread the Iron Dome closer to the most important or potential targets and strategic areas, whether it's large cities, airports, and the like. So we have the Iron Dome spread in the most important positions. Just like on October 7th, and I'm only sharing this because I know that I'm speaking to a group of people that are probably well informed and can use the information wisely. But on October 7th, we all know that some of our air defense systems were overwhelmed, and there were a lot of missiles that did land in civilian areas, and people were killed. Now, since then, the systems haven't been overwhelmed. Now, if there was a simultaneous attack at once, all rockets fired, then some of the defense wouldn't be hermetic. In other words, there would be rockets that would land. So the game is prioritizing. Do we have the systems necessary in order to protect all of the key strategic areas? Yes. Do we have systems that will defend every single civilian all the time? No. Nevo, do you want to fill in on anything there?
Yeah. So we on top of the Iron Dome, if you only had to trust Iron Dome, then it wouldn't be very wise because Iron Dome deals with short to medium range rockets. And if we're talking about the front with Hezbollah or with Iran, then we're definitely talking about more sophisticated and cruise missiles that can reach long range. What happened in the last attack is that we saw for the first time, or at least publicly on the media, for the first time, operational interceptions of David Sling and Arrow. So to just explain a little bit about how the defense doctrine or how the method is working is that we work in layers. While Iron Dome being the lowest layer of defense, I know we always hear about it because this is the immediate threat that we always receive. But then we have David Sling and then we have Arrow, which intercept in different heights. And ideally, all the systems are supposed to be interconnected and work together. So we have gaps, while we might have gaps in defense with just the Iron Dome, it's a good thing that we have all those other systems because then we can, like you said, Major Ross, like you said, we have to prioritize and see which system is more ideal for which type of target. And when all those systems work together, we get a more non-hermetic, but a more holistic defense, aerial defense.
Yeah, one more point there for those of you who are a little more interested in sort of the geeky details of things. I'd look up Arrow 2. It's one of another one of the systems which has most recently been used. I think the first time it was used was in the Eilat region. So Arrow 2 and Sea Dome, that's another one of our systems that are being successfully used. Again, I'm not in any way connected to the defense systems, but I'm very glad that we have them because they help to protect us against threats like we saw on Saturday night.
Yeah. Our next question is coming from Eyal Cohen. Eyal is an entrepreneur. He is graduating in the class of 2024 from Brandeis. He's an entrepreneur and the founder of Beta Innovation Club. And he's asking, how coordinated are Iran and its proxies after the strike on the commanders in Damascus?
It's a good question. And I think it's a question that is, once again, it's a question that we are all thinking about, trying to understand, Eyal. From the question of to what extent was Iran specifically directing and actively directing October 7th, and to what extent was it something that Hamas knew that Iran supported, or were there direct orders coming in terms of the time and the place? We don't know, and we probably never will. In terms of the coordination of the Iranian forces, well, we know that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps obviously are very close and in bed with Hezbollah. The Al-Quds Iranian forces are known to have trained many of the different Iranian proxies, and we've seen different training exercises over the years that have taken place. The Radwan forces of Hezbollah are also trained by Iran, and the Nukhba forces of Hamas have also had certain elements of Iranian training. So both in terms of training, in terms of resources, in terms of actual planning, it's an actual direct coordination and control. It's something that I think we'd all like to know. And those of us who do know, and the people that I know who know, wouldn't give away that type of information, because obviously if we know the channels of communication, then it will help us also identify threats and also deal with those threats.
Yeah. So our next question is coming from Haley Frankel. She's from Los Angeles, and she's asking, do you think the war with Iran will be limited to the air battles, or naval and land as well? U.S. military involvement, ? I guess if the U.S. military, we know that they helped us in the defense, but I guess she's asking about an offense type of an intervention.
Yeah, so I think we're all hoping that there's as much peace and stability as possible, and that we are able to reach diplomatic agreements and understandings that requires little as possible use of force. There are many people calling for an all-out attack on Iran. I definitely understand them. I think the Iranian threat is a formidable one, and one that we need to be ready to deal with. And that's in terms of the IDF's position, is we're ready to deal with it. We're ready to sustain and to both thwart it in terms of our air defense systems, and also to send in troops wherever we need to. I mean, we have the capabilities. If we had to, we bombed the Iranian core in the 80s, and we have had various other operations beyond our borders. Now, obviously, that's not the first choice option. Do we believe that the war will stay in the air? It's a good question. Obviously, if there's naval war, I think it's important to emphasize that even in terms of the Air Force battles and aerial defense systems, the navies are strongly involved in that. The US aerial defense capabilities that go with the US Navy are substantial, and there's a lot of people there that those of you who are American, those of you who aren't, have a lot to be proud of those who are American in terms of the capabilities and the way in which the US Navy has played a role in defending the citizens of Israel, and also whoever else Iran might seek to attack next. In terms of Navy, it would probably be US naval ships in the Gulf. Potentially is the Israeli Navy, our presence is primarily in the Red Sea or in the Mediterranean, or primarily in the Mediterranean with small presence in the Red Sea. Our Navy has intercepted missiles sent over from the Houthis in Yemen during these last months. So in that sense, there could be naval involvement. But it's important also to note that there are varying levels of Air Force battles. What we saw on Saturday night was a serious escalation, but obviously things could get a lot more substantial. Again, I'm not going to give you any classified information here, but with what I've said, I think it's pretty clear that we hope that we don't go there. But if that is the decision that we need to take, we're definitely capable, and together with our allies, both at sea and in the air, we're able to. Now clearly, in terms of troops on the ground, we have the capabilities. So do the US, forces that operate off ships and the like, out of the air. But I think we're probably going into once again, it's uncharted territory, and in that sense, your guess is as good as mine, really, Haley.
Yeah. It's certainly concerning if the war escalates and how many more fronts, because we know through the air it's a lot easier or a lot more effective, but nobody has done anything before like that before, such a major scale ground operation or through the ocean that involves the Middle East, at least not since World War II. So really, if this escalates to other fronts, we are looking to something on the scale, at least in terms of damage, of one of the world wars, which is very concerning. Now we have a question about how do we inform people around you. So this is from Nareed Kodak from Toronto, Canada, which is asking, how can we help improve the real story and communicate the truth to our sphere of influence?
Well, it's $1 million question, really. Nirit, you're right in, I think, asking it and being concerned. To be honest, I think you probably know best in your own world and your sphere of influence. When people ask me this question, I often talk about the divide it in between the short term and the long term. In the short term, you have an opportunity now, in the sense that the ugly head and the ugly reality of Iran's capabilities and the fact that it really is behind a lot of the destabilizing attempts in the Middle East in terms of its backing of Hamas and Hezbollah. Those things aren't always as clear as they were on Saturday night. So in the short run, you have an opportunity now to make it very clear what the destabilizing force in the region is. In terms of spreading accurate and truthful news, I think the most important thing is exposing yourself to a wide range of sources. So to be a good educator, to be somebody that's able to speak the truth, you also need to be exposed to it, and you also need to be willing and capable of engaging with different opinions. Sadly, there is a trend in, I don't know if it's just the West, but in probably all over the world, of polarization, of people not being able to listen to ideas that are different to their own, and attempts to boycott and drown out voices, which is very, very dangerous, especially for those who believe in the values of liberal democracy, which I personally do, and I know it's also the position of the Israel Defense Forces to encourage those types of values. And so the best way to to encourage other people to learn. I think it's to be a learner yourself and to share information that does push back on narratives which are seek to drown out. I mean, I've heard of people in the West supporting Houthis strikes on ships on ships bound for the West. I've heard people saying that Iranian attacks on Israel were self-defense and part of the axis of resistance. Now, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but it's really, really important in times like this to encourage people to pursue the truth, to educate themselves, and not to accept narratives that seek just to drown out others and seek to be overly simplistic, which a lot of the anti-Israel narratives are. And it's much easier to be anti something these days than it is to be pro. I strongly encourage everybody that seeks to be pro-Israel also to be pro the Palestinian people. But to be anti the Palestinian people is not to be pro-Israel. That's not helping us. Now, sometimes we need to be against our enemies. And I have no apologies ever for standing up and defending my people when they come under attack. That's not something that I think anybody should have to apologize for. But try and be pro, try and be supportive. And when people are overly seek to drown out your voice, I wouldn't waste energy on it. I know it's very tempting, it's very difficult. I think it's important to have empathy to everyone, but lead by example. Be someone that listens, be someone that values education. And education, when I say education, I mean real education of being willing to listen, to study, to ask difficult questions, and to engage. That's the advice that I can give you, and I appreciate the question.
And perhaps I can add to this something a little bit more. On college campuses, the climate doesn't really allow always dialogue or conversation, and a lot of people are kind of staying in their own side. And I was asked this question actually by a friend who's not Jewish and struggles in her workplace, because she wants to express some sort of support, but she doesn't want to take sides because you could sometimes pay a professional price. And what I told her is something that's worked for me when I'm being asked those questions or when I'm in those forums. Nobody can ever argue if you express genuine sorrow or regret about something. So as opposed to saying something political or like making a statement, we should release them, which should be trivial, but even that like triggers people. You could always say something like, this image, I can't get this out of my head. I really wish those babies would come back home. Something that expresses genuine opinion or genuine feeling or thought, because the big problem is that when those people are radicalized on both sides, they tend to dehumanize the other side. And so when you express this, you sort of bring all those human emotions to the surface, and it makes the other person say, okay, I'm not debating right now, I'm just facing someone who's genuinely concerned about the situation. Could de-escalate the tone. Now, the next question is an engineer's question. And it's coming from Rafi Rubenstein, who's currently a signal processing engineer in the greater Philadelphia area. And he's asking what progress has been made on the Iron Beam, a system since the start of the war, and how long until it will become operational?
Okay, so Rafi, I'm not an engineer like you. The and to be honest, when I heard the question, it made me sort of chuckle to myself that someone on the West Coast would be asking about the Iron Beam because of certain politicians or prominent people that have talked about Jewish people and lasers. Um, and the and the reality that once we have an iron beam, we will be able to say that the Jewish state does actually send lasers into space and fire them at people. So sorry for the comic element there, but we need a little bit of comedy, all of us. In terms of the specific developments, it's not something that I'm able to disclose at this time. Once it is fully operational and we use it, then you'll know about it. But I'm afraid I can't disclose more. The iron beam is a significant element of our research and development in the area of defense systems. Obviously, the added value and added capability will be significant to be able to use laser technology to shoot down incoming missiles. But beyond that, I'm afraid I'm not able to disclose anymore at this time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we have another question that's related to our capabilities, and I'm assuming that there's also going to be a limited answer on that, but it's an interesting question, so I'm still going to bring it up. What research and development is the IDF doing for UAVs? For those of you who don't know, it's unarmed vehicles or drones. And how do drones minimize danger for soldiers on the ground? When is UAVs, or I guess when are UAVs not effective and we need soldiers? And that's coming from Daniel Zarur. He's a computer science major and minoring in physics and environmental science at Brandeis University, class of 26.
Okay, so I'm afraid in terms of the final element of the question of when do you need a human and when is it something that the drone or the UAV unarmed aerial vehicle can do it itself, you could probably give a better answer than the one any that I would give. It's to do with the decision making needs of needing to have a pilot inside the aircraft at the time, and what level of discretion and what level of information you're willing to basically invest into the aircraft without actually having to have a pilot that is going to be making real-time decisions. So it will be to do with the complexity of the mission, the importance of the munitions, the type of the mission as well. For instance, if one were to use a kamikaze drone or an arms drone, in other words, some of the often the drones used by Hezbollah and by Hamas are armed drones. In other words, it's not a drone that you'll use for yourself for filming, or the ones that you've seen like that. It's maybe many times bigger than that, but they add explosive onto that and they ram it into whatever target they have, whatever car, home, or the like. In terms of what drones do we have and what we're using, again, I'm not going to give you specific specifications, so I don't know if it'll meet your engineering standards, but I can tell you to look to the publicly available information on the multidimensional unit, which is one of the technological units in the IDF which connects both our troops on the ground with state-of-the-art technology, and drones are used by them. It's really one of the interesting developments in modern warfare. Using drones, it's a relatively inexpensive, relatively speaking, way to get information. You strap a camera to a drone, and then you can use it just like you'd use a drone to increase your capabilities for filming. You can do the same in a military scenario. And small drones are being used inside tunnels, inside buildings, to help protect troops and to discover terrorists inside buildings. So that gives you there's a range that we're using at the moment. In terms of the research and development, I'm afraid I can't disclose any information. But in terms of the operational uses, they're very broad. Primarily, they're used in order to protect troops, and also in order to increase visibility, to carry materials, and so that they're being used quite broadly, both by us and also actually by our enemies. You can imagine the sophistication is a lot higher in terms of what the IDF has, but if you probably look over the coming years at the visuals that come out of the IDF, your guess might well be better than mine. And maybe if you came here, we could have a chat and we could talk more. But I'm afraid I'm not able to give specifics.
So we have a couple of questions left, and we're coming closer to our time. So the first question would be, were there any surprises from the Iranian missile attack that you can share with us? And it's coming from Rob Joseph from the Boston area.
So Rob, in terms of surprises, I think as an Israeli that lives here on the ground, I can say for me personally, the level of the quantity and the volume of the attack was a surprise. In terms of the way we dealt with it, it really did go according to plan. In terms of both the cooperation and coordination between us and our allies, and also in terms of our own defense systems. It's obviously encouraging when the plan goes, when the execution goes according to plan. But in terms of, so as a civilian, I can say I was somewhat pleasantly surprised by how well we operated it. But as a soldier and as a spokesperson, and as a member of the military, I'm not surprised that the Air Force did a very, very good job, and that the regional alliances also worked well. I'm trying to think if there's any other beef I can give you, but I don't think so. I think the other thing which I emphasized at the beginning of the briefing when Nevo asked me how I was doing was the speed at which the Israeli society moved from a state of really anxiety and stress to life continuing, which is a testament to the resilience of the people here, and also I think a testament to sadly having got used to some of the very difficult circumstances that we've been dealing with over the past months. But on a military level, I don't think that there really was too much of a surprise.
Yeah.
You want
Yeah,
to add anything to that, Nevo?
I'm sorry.
Did you want to add anything to that?
No. I would just say, we've been expecting Iran to attack at some point. To me, it almost feels like a relief that it already happened. I'm not to put this lightly, but it is what it is. I know I said we have one more question, but there are two questions that are related, because I want to circle back to the current situation in Gaza. So a lot of people are eager to know what's happening in northern Gaza with Hamas seemingly coming back and attacking the IDF, and that's coming from an anonymous question. And
Okay, so that's one question.
that's one question, and I'll wrap up with the last question.
No worries. Okay, so first of all, whoever you are, really appreciate the question. The situation in northern Gaza is really one of the most difficult and devastating realities of the war since October 7th. The situation in northern Gaza is that the people that stayed there are a large numbers of them are the the populations who are most at risk, really, the people that either couldn't afford to move, people that had for some physical or other disability chose not to or were not able to move. And they've been dealing with immensely difficult situations of living through a war zone. And so the humanitarian crisis there has been severe. Thankfully, due to the operations, and the fact that the IDF had an operational hold on northern Gaza for a significant period of time, we were able to increase the amount of humanitarian aid trucks going in over the last weeks. And so the humanitarian crisis hopefully will decrease. Now, there is a reality in that distribution is a challenge in areas which are fraught by war, and also areas where it's very difficult for humanitarian aid workers to operate. And so the reality in which Hamas has returned, I think it's sometimes overblown. The Hamas battalions, the Hamas companies, they've all been completely dismantled. So what we see happening is individual small cells of Hamas members returning and seeking to reinstate their hold over the civilians, over aid, and prevent the people of Gaza from managing anything for themselves or even feeding themselves. And so the reality is a difficult one. I think it's hard for anybody who sees what's going on there, I think is very concerned. In terms of what we're doing, for over a month now, we haven't had a continual presence in northern Gaza. What we're doing is we have an operational hold on the Kani corridor, which actually separates northern and southern Gaza. And so people can't just go and cross that. There are Hamas members that have managed somehow to raise their ugly heads again. And the IDF has shown that we're willing to and capable to deal with that. The good thing is that the amount of forces that we need to deal with that threat at the moment is a fraction of the size of forces that went in initially. Obviously, that means that the damage and the deaths that they may cause is again exponentially smaller. And also the reality is that it's not a massive hold on northern Gaza. It's small cells that are seeking to gain hold. And so it's important to remember that, and that the reality of them having so small amount of Hamas members in northern Gaza is also what's enabled the increase of aid into northern Gaza.
Yeah. There was another question about aid, but you mentioned it briefly, and we're running out of time. So I would like to wrap up with this very important question, because I want us to all keep in mind that while we're still talking, there are still 134 hostages still held in Gaza. And, this is what started all this. So I want us to remember that. So the question is, how much is Iran dictating the terms for Hamas with regard to the release of hostages? Is there a risk of less focus on them, as the focus on Iran directly has risen to the surface? And that was brought up by Nancy Holwitz.
So thanks for the question, Nancy. I think it's very, very, as I mentioned earlier, it's very difficult to know the direct links between the Hamas political military leadership and the Iranian leadership. I think what many people are speculating, and this is not the position of the IDF, but what many people are speculating is that there's probably a stronger link between Iran and the political elements of Hamas rather than Iran and the military elements of Hamas. And that's just by virtue of the means of communication and the fact that the Hamas members who are still in the Gaza Strip are extremely limited in their ability to communicate with the outside world because of the successful operations by the IDF. In terms of would the escalation or potential further potential for the current escalation, the potential further escalation lead to some type of impact on the hostage deals, it's very difficult to know. What I can say is that both the IDF and, to the best of my knowledge, the Israeli government directive to the IDF is that the hostages are a very, very high priority to us, and the reason for our operation is to release the hostages. As we know, the way we were able to get the initial hostage deal was the successful and sadly also extremely devastating attacks on Gaza in response to October 7th and the taking of the hostages. And that's what led to the deal in which nearly half of those who were taken hostage returned. But is Iran gonna impact that? It's really, really hard to say. There's again this speculation that there could be conflicting interests between Iran and the Hamas leadership inside the Gaza Strip, especially if looking at which actors are rational actors, or actors that will respond to first the idea of sticks and carrots, but also the question of who will respond to force, because Hamas, sadly, there is an element to which even force doesn't, to certain degrees it works, but then to another degree, for the radical Islamist ideology and jihadist ideology, the deaths could even be seen as a good thing and as strengthening the cause. And so in that sense, there could be some type of conflict between interests between Hamas and Iran on that issue. Again, this is speculation, and this is me. It's not an official IDF position, but that's food for thought. It's definitely something that there's many people over here that are thinking about it. And so in terms of bringing our hostages home, it's difficult to know exactly how different types of military action or different types of non-action will impact the hostages. It honestly, it's really hard to know, but it's in our minds, and it's something that we're thinking about. And so hopefully I've given you a bit of food for thought there, I know both us on the side of the IDF, but also all of you in your positions at home, do what you can to impact creating the conditions to bring all of the hostages home as soon as possible. And for us here in Israel, and for those of you in the US or around the world who are celebrating Passover and remembering the Jewish people coming out of captivity in Egypt, it's definitely something that will be at the forefront of our minds during the Seders. So yeah, I think that's all I have on that question. But I don't know, Nevo, I think it looks like we're running out of time. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we round up?
No, just that I'm glad that we're wrapping up with this question, because this is really the main concern of all Israelis right now and of Jews around the world. And we want those hostages to come back home now. So with that, I would like to thank you, Major David Ross, for joining us today. Thank you for giving us the time and answering those questions. And I would like to thank everybody else who joined in such short notice. It was important for us to do it because the attack happened on Saturday, and we're coming into the week of Passover. So we try to cram it. I know there are a lot of people who registered and wanted to come and couldn't come because it was last minute. So this event will be recorded and will be posted and shared. So you can also share it with your people. So thank you very much. Major Ross, is there anything else, last words you would like to say?
No, thank you, Nevo, for organizing this. Thank you, all of you, for continuing to be engaged. It says a lot about you for seeking out this information, for being supportive, for seeking to listen, hearing. the fact that I was able to be in a briefing with a group of people from university, and I wasn't broken into and interrupted. I think it's probably something to do with Nevo, but also to do with all of you. I appreciate your listening, really do. And thank you for your support. And Am Yisrael Chai. I hope we all have a peaceful Passover, and hopefully one in which we'll see the hostages return home, either before or soon after. So thank you very much. And yeah, once again, have a good rest of your day. And thanks for being with us.